Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. We're on Monday again because I'm hitting the road for the next 2 days so that I can get you reviews of F1 and 28 Years Later as soon as I possibly can. So we're going to be using the dreaded estimates today, but the number one movie at the box office was pretty clear, so I don't think there's a whole lot that's going to change. We have a lot of ground to cover and a lot of movies and shows to talk about. So let's jump right into the top 10 for this past weekend. And at number one, as expected, was the live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon, which debuted to an estimated number of $83.7 million. However, that has been going up throughout the weekend, and I think the Sunday is going to be a pretty big movie-going day. So don't be surprised if those estimates get revised a little bit higher and if the actuals come in a little bit higher, because this has been a movie that has really outperformed even what people thought it was going to do going into this weekend. We're going to break down a lot of stuff about this movie in just a few minutes. Lilo and Stitch, another movie from the same writers and one of the co-directors, is in second place, another live-action remake with a 42% drop in its fourth weekend of release and a $15.5 million weekend overall. It's now at $366 million domestically. Materialists from A24 and director Celine Song debuts in third place with $12 million. That is a very strong opening for A24, and we'll find out just how strong later in the show. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning in its fourth weekend dropped 31% and made another $10.3 million. It's at $166.3 million. From the world of John Wick, Ballerina drops from second place to fifth place with a pretty steep 62% drop in weekend number two. Given the fact that reviews were pretty good, it seemed like word of mouth was all right. That's a bit steeper than I would have thought, but we'll see how it does going forward. It brought in $9.4 million for a $41.8 million total so far. In sixth place is Karate Kid Legends with a 42% drop and a $5 million weekend. It's made $44.1 million thus far. Final Destination Bloodlines is still hanging around. In its fifth weekend of release, it dropped 40%, brought in another $3.9 million, and is now at $130.6 million domestically. The Phoenician Scheme is in eighth place. It dropped 51% and brought in another $3 million. Debuting in the top 10 at number 9 is The Life of Chuck, the Toronto International Film Festival prize winner, being distributed by Neon. It went into wide release and brought in $2.1 million, which is pretty good for Neon, but it's interesting to see where The Life of Chuck is going to fall into the life cycle of previous Toronto Film Festival People's Choice winners. We're going to look at that. And then Sinners, as of right now, the margin is pretty close between number 10 and number 11, but if Sinners hangs on to that number 10 spot in its ninth week of release with another $1.4 million, then it will become officially the 2025 release that has spent the longest in the domestic top 10 at 9 weeks. A Minecraft movie, Dog Man, and Captain America Brave New World would be bumped down to second at 8 weeks, and then One of Them Days is at 7 weeks. So I'm going to be looking at those numbers to see if Sinners hangs around at that number 10 spot. Bring Her Back is the movie that is pretty close to Sinners. It's currently at number 11. Speaking of Bring Her Back, it is one of 3 movies that, according to the estimated numbers, dropped out of the top 10 this week. Thunderbolts drops out after 6 weeks, Bring Her Back is out after 2 weeks, and Don to Don Evil Eye is out after just 1 week. And looking at the biggest theater count changes from this past weekend, well, this would explain why Bring Her Back seems right now to have dropped out of the top 10, because it lost about half of its theaters. 1,175 of them. Theater owners were not keen to keep that movie around for very long. It's still in 1,250. The Life of Chuck had the second biggest change with an addition of 1,056 theaters. It's now in 1,072. Thunderbolts lost a little over half of its theaters. It lost 1,045 of them. It's still in 910, so it is out of wide release. Karate Kid Legends lost 851 theaters, and Final Destination Bloodlines lost 729 theaters. It's still in over 2,100. This is what I like to call our road to recovery. The blue line is the box office weekend average for 2015 to 2019. The red line is 2021 to 2024. And the dotted black line is every weekend this year. And you can see that we at least got back up to the average of where we have been since theaters reopened after the closure due to the pandemic. We are not where we were, certainly on average, prior to the pandemic, but we'll see where we are next week with How to Train Your Dragon in the marketplace, with Elio opening, with 28 Years Later opening. I think if those movies all hit and if How to Train Your Dragon stays about where it has been, that we could see a nice boost to next weekend's box office, but we're just going to see how high we can go. So let's break down some of the movies that are in the top 10 this past weekend, and we will start with How to Train Your Dragon. First of all, it had the fourth best opening weekend domestically for a movie this year, about $10 million more than Thunderbolts and about $5 million less than Captain America Brave New World. And this was not a $250 million production. The budget reportedly was around $150 million. So it's in pretty good shape on its opening weekend. The audience response was good. It was an A cinema score. So it is set up to do good business, but the question is, how does it hold up against Elio? Will these two family films be able to share the same marketplace, or is it going to cannibalize Elio's market? We don't know just yet, but we'll see what it does in the next several days. This is the franchise tracker for How to Train Your Dragon, and you can see that it had easily the biggest opening weekend of the franchise so far with $83.7 million. And How to Train Your Dragon is interesting as a franchise because, as you can see, each installment opened bigger than the last one did. And that holds true to form even if you adjust for inflation. 3 just edges out How to Train Your Dragon 2, $69.1 million to $67.1 million. And then the first How to Train Your Dragon is at $64.4 million adjusted for inflation. But this is what I think is interesting. If you take the live action element out here, this is the How to Train Your Dragon franchise by final domestic gross. And by this metric, every sequel grossed less in animated form than the one before. I can't remember seeing this pattern before, where every movie in a franchise opened bigger than the one before, but also made less than the one before. And so I think you can see why they turned to the live action format. And I still hear from a lot of people saying that they don't think that this movie should have been made. They don't understand why it was made. It's because people mostly go to see them. I mean, the number one movie of the summer right now is a live action remake. How to Train Your Dragon right now is on track, at least, is on a course to be one of the biggest movies of the summer. So I understand why people are questioning, the wisdom of making it from a creative level, but it is still a business, and the studios are going to make the things that audiences are telling them, largely with their wallets, that they want them to make. And so far this summer, the domestic audience here, and also so far worldwide, has told the studios loud and clear, yeah, we will definitely go see these live action remakes, and you're going to be rewarded for making more. I know that the art part and the commerce part are strange bedfellows when it comes to movies, but the business part is always going to get a big spotlight at the studios. And as long as the audience keeps going to these remakes, I can promise you the studios are just going to keep making them. Speaking of live action remakes, Lilo and Stitch is now the third highest grossing Disney live action remake at $366.3 million. That puts it ahead of The Jungle Book and Aladdin, but I think it's going to stay there. Looking at the legs, it actually hasn't had great staying power. It didn't fall off a cliff, but it hasn't had great staying power, especially for a family film during the summer. So I don't really see any path for it to get to where Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King are. But still, this was also a film that had a smaller production budget, and so Disney is going to do very well from a dollars and cents angle on Lilo and Stitch. But you can kind of see what I'm talking about as far as the movie's legs. This is Minecraft versus Lilo and Stitch in the race to what is going to be the number one movie domestically, or at least the highest grossing movie between these two. And you can see that Minecraft had a bit of a stronger start, but Lilo and Stitch caught up over Memorial Day and over that next week. But then the week after, you can see that they pulled about even. And over the last 7 days, when you would think that maybe Lilo and Stitch would close some of that gap because it has summer weekdays, it did close the gap a bit in the middle of the week, but you see the gap opening up a little bit more over this past weekend, and now a Minecraft movie is starting to open up a bit of a lead. Of course, Minecraft had all of the memes and the TikTok stuff, and that kept people going to theaters, so we'll see what the ultimate effect is. But yeah, Lilo and Stitch fading a bit in the back half. Materialists is kind of the anti How to Train Your Dragon Lilo and Stitch movie in the top 5. It is a very small A24 film from director Celine Song, but it was marketed to a wide audience. It was put in very wide release, and it was marketed in many ways as a return to the romantic comedy, and it had the third best opening ever for an A24 film. This is either the opening weekend for each of these films or the weekend in which they eventually hit wide release. Civil War still has the biggest wide release opening for A24 at $25.7 million. Hereditary is in second place at $13.5 million. And then at just over $12 million, Materialists is in third place all time ahead of Heretic and Talk to Me. Uncut Gems, The Witch, Warfare, Bring Her Back, and The Green Knight round out the top 10. So 3 of A24's 10 highest grossing weekends have come this year, which is good for A24 on a business level, but this is something I wanted to investigate. These are the cinema scores for each of these films. You can see that Civil War got a B-, which for a typical wide release, a studio film, isn't great. Hereditary got a D+. That's a horrible cinema score for a studio movie. Materialists also got a B-, and this really often judges expectations. This means the audience didn't quite get what it expected, and I agree with Materialists. It's not exactly what the marketing is telling you it is. A C+ for Heretic, a B+ for Talk to Me, a C+ for Uncut Gems, a C- for The Witch, an A- for Warfare. Bring Her Back got a B+, and The Green Knight got a C+. So out of these 10 movies, really only 3 of them, Warfare, Bring Her Back, and Talk to Me, got what you would anticipate from a major studio film that has won over the fans, that has people that enjoyed it to one degree or another. Those other scores are much lower for a wide release, and I think what this is telling you, if you're looking at the scores and also watching these movies, is that A24's strategy when putting a movie out in wide release is to market it inside of a genre, horror or rom-com or whatever, in a way that makes it seem a little bit more mainstream than it is in order to get people into theaters on that first weekend. I think what they run the risk of doing here, though, is damaging the brand, because if they keep, I think in some cases, in my mind, mismarketing their films, then eventually people are going to stop trusting them as a distributor. I know not everyone looks at the distributor, but I'm very kind of two minds on A24's strategy. I do want to see their movies succeed. I want to see their mission of giving great filmmakers like Celine Song the resources they need and the exposure they need. I think that's a good thing. But the flip side of it is that I often think they misrepresent the product that they're putting in theaters, which could harm those movies and potentially other movies going forward. But at least for weekend number 1, it's a win for Materialists. I'm curious to see what weekend number 2 is going to be like for this film and what word of mouth does for the box office returns. Something we've been tracking for the last couple of weeks is not only the box office for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning versus The Final Reckoning, but also any indication of the so-called Barbenheimer effect, where many people thought that Dead Reckoning's box office was hurt by the fact that it opened the week before Barbie and Oppenheimer. And as we get later and later into the release cycle for both films, we're seeing a little bit more of an indication that there may have been more of an effect than I even gave it credit for after that first weekend. The green there is Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning. The red is Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. And where they begin to diverge is about the point where Barbie and Oppenheimer hit theaters. And so as that gap widens, we could be seeing the Barbenheimer effect unfold right before our eyes as The Final Reckoning begins to track further and further ahead of Dead Reckoning. And speaking of Mission Impossible, on last week's show, I made what some people might call a dumb move, because I did my first profitability breakdown. And for some reason, in my head, at the time I was making the graphics, $400 million plus $150 million equaled $650 million, not $550 million. Well, that mistake was noticed almost immediately and then noticed many, many times more. I have no excuse for it other than the fact that I just had too many numbers swimming around my head and I made a stupid math error. It was interesting to see people's reaction to that mistake, because it ran the gamut from, oh, look at that, Dan made a silly math error in this week's episode, to, oh, once again, Dan is showing his blatant anti-Tom Cruise vendetta, and he's once again spreading misinformation about the box office performance of Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning. Which I was not. It was this side. It was a silly math error. But I have to make my mistakes correct. So let's look at my actual corrected breakdown as far as Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning's profitability in the theatrical window. You can see how much I am anticipating is coming back to the studio and investors from the various theatrical markets on the left side. The budget is $400 million. The marketing budget is $150 million. That equals $550 million, not $650 million. So I have a gross right now globally of $506.8 million. I'm estimating a net return of $222.2 million. And when you subtract that from $550 million, that puts the movie merely $327.7 million away from my estimated break-even point in the theatrical window. And as you can see, that changes my profitability outlook for Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning from, oh my God, it looks like it's going to lose so much money in the theatrical window, to, oh my God, it looks like it's still going to lose a lot of money in the theatrical window. As always, I apologize for my mistake, and I'm happy that I could give the Tom Cruise conspiracy theorists some stuff to work with last week. The Phoenician Scheme is still in the top 10, and as you can see on Wes Anderson's all-time domestic grosser list, it is now past the Darjeeling Limited for number 10 all-time. If you adjust for inflation, though, it's still at number 11, about $6 million behind the Darjeeling Limited. So it looks like this film is going to be on the lower end of his domestic grossers. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about The Life of Chuck, which entered wide release this past weekend. Now, The Life of Chuck won the People's Choice Award at the Toronto International Film Festival last fall. And that award specifically is often very predictive of award show success. The main difference being that usually the movies that win that award are entering an active awards season, meaning that they're going to be eligible for the Oscars and all the other awards that year. Whereas The Life of Chuck was a bit of a surprise winner. It did not have distribution when it played in Toronto, and thus it has just come out this year during the summer, way outside of the traditional award season cycle. But I wanted to look at the previous winners, the previous 9 winners of the Toronto International Film Festival People's Choice Award, and what happened to them at the Oscars. And you can see that of the 9 movies that won the award before The Life of Chuck, every single one of them became a Best Picture nominee or winner. Room, La La Land, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, Green Book, Jojo Rabbit, Nomadland, Belfast, The Fabelmans, and American Fiction. All of those movies were Best Picture nominees, and a lot of them picked up major awards, even if it wasn't Best Picture. A Best Actress for Room, several for La La Land, a lot of acting awards for Three Billboards, Green Book acting awards and Best Picture, Jojo Rabbit for its screenplay, Nomadland won several, Belfast was an Oscar winner. The Fabelmans kind of stands out because it did not win one of those major Oscars, but American Fiction won for its screenplay. And so to keep up the pattern, The Life of Chuck now has a little bit of pressure on it, but I'm not really sure if it's going to deliver because it had good critical reaction, but I wouldn't say strong critical reception, something that said, oh, this is going to survive until the end of the year, and a lot of critics are going to put it on their top 10 and help to make it relevant in the award season. I saw the movie. I enjoyed it, but it also is not going to be a movie that I'm going to put on my top 10 list at the end of the year. I can say pretty safely at this point. So we could be looking at the first movie in a decade to break the pattern of the People's Choice Award winner at Toronto not getting nominated for Best Picture, but it's also way too early to decide what is or isn't going to be nominated for the Oscars. But right now, if I was a betting man, I would say that The Life of Chuck is going to break that pattern. That doesn't make it a bad movie, but I think it also proves that patterns and rules are made to be broken. So those are updates on the top 10, but of course the box office was dominated by How to Train Your Dragon, which is controversially a remake of the 2010 animated film. And for the members here on the channel, last week I asked a question, which is, what animated film do you think would benefit from a live action remake? What do you think would make a good live action remake? And we had a pretty clear winner. The number 1 vote getter was Atlantis: The Lost Empire with 59 votes. In second place was The Iron Giant with 23 votes. I'm not so sure I agree with that. I think the animated film is pretty perfect. Treasure Planet came in third with 19 votes. I think that's a pretty solid choice. I was surprised to see Brave in fourth place at 13 votes, just because with all the bear stuff, I just don't really see how that would work in live action. But The Polar Express I thought was an interesting choice at number 12. A lot of people citing the creepy animation in the original and going back and doing it in live action to correct these sort of dead-eyed characters in that film. But I think Atlantis: The Lost Empire is a great winner here because it's an animated film that didn't get its due and that you could perhaps spin into a new direction and sort of rebirth anew with a live action remake. This week I have a question in honor of one of the big movies opening this upcoming weekend, which is 28 Years Later. Believe it or not, we are 28 years removed from the year 1997. It's a year that had a lot of great movies. And so my member poll question is, what movie from 1997 would you want to see a sequel to set 28 years later? So it would pick up the action 28 years from the previous film. You can leave your pick in the comments of the member poll, which is live already now here on the channel. Or if you see your answer already in the comments, you can upvote your favorite. The 5 picks with the most upvotes will be revealed here next week. And if you're not yet a channel member, I'd love to have you come join us. Depending on how you're watching this video, there might just be a button for you to push that says become a member, or you can check the description below. Not only do you get to vote in the polls here every week on Charts with Dan, you also get special badges and emoji for the comment section, and you get some of my videos early. So we'd love to have you join, and you can have your voice heard each and every week right here on the show. Speaking of 28 years later, the Charts with Dan trivia question for this week is concerning the first movie in the franchise, 28 Days Later, and the question is this: in 2003, 28 Days Later grossed less than 3 horror franchise sequels, prequels, or reboots domestically. What were they? I'll give you a minute to think. This might be giving away too much, but I will say one of them could represent 2 different franchises. So here are the answers. The 3 horror franchise movies that 28 Days Later grossed less than were Freddy vs. Jason, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot, and Final Destination 2. And I think that this year's release, 28 years later, will likely gross a lot more than the $45 million or so that we saw from the original 22 years ago. And it feels like it should have been 28 years ago, doesn't it? We've got a lot more to cover on this week's show, but before we do, I'm going to thank the sponsor for this episode. This video is brought to you by Mando. Have you ever sweat all the way through your shirt? It happens to me every summer here in the Arkansas humidity, and if it happens to you too, you know how much it sucks. You either have to change, stay wet and hot outside, or stay wet and cold inside until you dry off. Luckily, Mando has introduced something new to help make sure that that doesn't happen to you this summer, the Mando Deodorant Plus Sweat Control Solid Stick. I've been using Mando as a deodorant for a while, but now it's even better because it makes summer more bearable. Not only can Mando keep you smelling great, but after just 12 hours, Mando Sweat Control reduces sweat by 92%. And when it comes to smelling good, Mando isn't about masking odor, it prevents it. 100% of participants in a Mando study experienced all-day odor protection, which, if I'm getting my math right, means everybody. And summer is the best time to give Mando a try. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like a mini body wash or deodorant wipes, and free shipping. As a special offer for fans of the show, new customers get 20% off site-wide with my exclusive code. Use code DAN at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. That's shopmando.com. Please support the show and tell them that I sent you. Mando's got you covered with deodorant plus sweat control, so you can say goodbye to sweat stains and hello to long-lasting freshness. All right, let's turn our attention now from the domestic marketplace to the international marketplace that's everywhere outside of the US and Canada. And these are the top 5 films internationally this past weekend. How to Train Your Dragon started with $114.1 million from many different countries around the world. Lilo & Stitch is in second with $31.3 million. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning brought in another $21 million internationally. At number 4 is From the World of John Wick: Ballerina with another $13.5 million. And Houseful 5 from India rounds out the top 5 with $4.18 million. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with our domestic numbers, we get the top 5 films worldwide. And How to Train Your Dragon started off with a very strong, again, especially considering its budget, $197.8 million opening weekend around the world. And again, those numbers could go up. It could be up to $200 million. Lilo & Stitch brought in another $46.8 million. It's now at $858 million worldwide. Mission Impossible brought in $31.3 million. It's now cracked the $500 million mark worldwide. From the World of John Wick: Ballerina saw a similar slide worldwide as it did domestically. It dropped 55.1%, brought in another $22.9 million though. It's now at $91.5 million worldwide. And then Materialists, driven largely by its debut here in the domestic marketplace, comes in 5th place at $15.5 million worldwide. And as you can see from this graphic, How to Train Your Dragon had the 4th best opening weekend worldwide for any film this year. It comes in just ahead of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, but pretty substantially behind Ne Zha 2, Lilo and Stitch, and then the champion so far this year, a Minecraft movie at $313.4 million. But a good start for How to Train Your Dragon. We'll see if it can sustain that start in the weeks ahead. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is climbing up its franchise chart. It has now passed the worldwide gross of the first Mission Impossible film, as well as Mission Impossible 3, at $506.8 million, and it has Mission Impossible 2 and Dead Reckoning Part 1 within striking distance, although it's got a lot more work to do if it wants to get up to the $700 million-ish mark that it would take to beat Rogue Nation and Ghost Protocol. And from the world of John Wick, Ballerina is now the 4th highest grossing film in the franchise worldwide. It has passed the $87.7 million that the first John Wick brought in, but I don't think that it is going to get close to the rest of the films in the franchise, starting with John Wick Chapter 2 at $171.5 million. Let's take a look now at what I call some of our specialty charts here in the domestic marketplace, and we will start with the per theater average, at least as of the time of reporting. Some movies get added to this list later on. How to Train Your Dragon leads the way, bringing in $19,214 on average in each of its 4,356 theaters, so a good weekend for theater owners running that movie. Tatami is in second place. It brought in $16,200 in just one theater, and this is a very interesting story. The movie debuted at Venice almost 2 years ago, and it's about an Iranian judo champion who's told that she is forbidden to compete against an Israeli competitor for a world championship and has to choose between dropping out or defying her country. The movie is directed by Guy Nativ, who is Israeli, and Zar Amir Ebrahimi, who is Iranian. As I said, this movie debuted almost 2 years ago. The release date, I'm sure, has been set for quite some time. There's no way that anybody could have known that it would hit theaters on the same week that open conflict would start between Iran and Israel, but I think that it probably makes the meaning and the message of this film that more timely. In third place is Materialists, which brought in $4,220 in each of its 2,844 theaters. Lilo and Stitch is right behind in fourth place, and Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning rounds out the top 5 at $3,501 per theater in each of its 2,900 theaters. These were the top films in limited release, which I define as 1,000 theaters or fewer. At number 1 is The Unholy Trinity, a Western starring Pierce Brosnan and Samuel L. Jackson. It brought in $559,000 in 771 theaters. Houseful 5 is in second place with $267,000. Dakuan Damunda 3, in an unknown number of theaters, comes in third place with $163,000. This is a Punjabi language biographical action film from India, a franchise that began back in 2018. Jane Austen Wrecked My Life is on the chart again in its fourth week of release. It brought in $57,000 in 92 theaters, and Tatami, in just one theater, again as of the time I'm reporting this, rounds out the top 5 with $16,200 in that one theater. This is the 2025 domestic summer box office so far. Lilo and Stitch remains at the top with $366.3 million, basically doubling up Thunderbolt, which is at $188.7 million. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is closing in on that number 2 spot. It's at $166.3 million. Final Destination: Bloodlines with a strong showing at $130.6 million. How to Train Your Dragon debuts at number 5 on the summer box office list. That bumps Karate Kid Legends and John Wick Ballerina down 1 spot each. Bring Her Back stays at number 8. Friendship drops down 2 spots to number 9. And The Last Rodeo is down 1 spot to number 10. Clown in a Cornfield falls off of the domestic summer top 10. And looking at my predictions versus the actual summer top 10 so far, I predicted Lilo and Stitch at number 1. It is currently number 1. How to Train Your Dragon I predicted as my number 2 movie of the summer, and I think it did have a very strong opening weekend, but I think that I may have put it a little bit too high. Many people said that, but I still have faith that it could very easily be a top 5 summer movie. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning I projected to be number 5. It's currently number 3. Thunderbolts I had at number 8 for the summer. It's still number 2, but I think that a lot of movies are going to start passing it pretty soon. The next movie to open that I put on my top 10 list is Elio, which opens this Friday. I picked it as the number 9 movie of the summer. I'm very happy that none of my picks have been eliminated so far, but something's got to give, because in order to make room for the Final Destinations of the world, some of these movies are going to drop off, and we'll just have to see which ones they are. Looking at the overall 2025 domestic box office, a Minecraft movie remains number one, followed by Lilo and Stitch, Sinners, Captain America Brave New World, and Thunderbolts. Mission Impossible is at number 6. Final Destination Bloodlines is at number 7. Those are the 7 films that have passed $100 million so far. How to Train Your Dragon will soon be number 8. Dogman and Snow White are at numbers 8 and 9 for now, but their days are numbered because How to Train Your Dragon debuts at number 10, and it will be climbing up this chart with rapidity in the upcoming days. And these are the top 10 movies of 2025 at the worldwide box office so far. Of course, we have Nudja 2 at $2.2 billion, entrenched in that number 1 spot. Minecraft and Lilo and Stitch remain at numbers 2 and 3. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is now the number 4 movie worldwide so far this year. That moves Detective Chinatown 1900 down to number 5. The rest of the top 10 remains the same, but How to Train Your Dragon is just outside that top 10. So starting on next week's show, we're going to see it moving up this chart as well. And that's what's going on at the box office. Before we wrap up the show, I very quickly wanted to look at the latest streaming ratings, including a check-in on how Andor has been performing against other Star Wars shows on Disney+, and the performance of The Last of Us versus The Last of Us Season 2. But let's start with a look at the Netflix charts. This is the Netflix data for the week of June 2nd through the 8th. And the number 1 program was Tyler Perry's latest film, Straw, which debuted to 25.28 million views. A pretty easy number 1. Ginny and Georgia Season 3 is in second place at 17.65 million views. A Widow's Game, which is a holdover title, is at number 3. At number 4 is the Netflix movie KO, a French film about an MMA fighter looking for redemption by finding a missing child. The Heart Knows, another carryover film, is at number 5. Department Q Season 1 is at number 6 with 8.88 million views. Sirens, the Netflix limited series, is at number 7. At number 8 is a new series, Sarah, Woman in the Shadows Season 1, an Italian series about a retired spy who returns to her old ways after the death of her son. At number 9 is The Survivors, an Australian series about the survivors of a tragic storm. And at number 10 is Mercy for None, a South Korean series about a retired gangster who returns to his old ways after the death of his brother. And surprisingly, at least to me, Straw from Tyler Perry had the 4th best debut for any movie on Netflix this year at 25.28 million views. It actually had better views in its first few days of release than The Electric State, Netflix's most expensive movie ever made, at 25.22 million views. So I think that investment in Tyler Perry right now is paying off a little bit more than the investment they made in The Electric State. And Straw actually has the 5th best debut of any program on Netflix in 2025, just behind Havoc, American Murder, Gabby Petito, Exterritorial, and Back in Action, which still is easily number 1 for the year so far. Moving on now to the latest numbers from Nielsen. Now, these are domestic numbers only, not global numbers like we saw with Netflix, and they're delayed by about a month because that's how long it takes Nielsen to get those numbers out to us. So this is for the week of May 12th through the 18th, and these were the most watched streaming movies for that week. At number 1 was Nonus, which brought in 14.1 million hours watched, followed by A Deadly American Marriage. Instant Family debuts on the list at number 3 with 5.3 million hours watched, followed by Beetlejuice. Novocaine on Paramount Plus debuts in the top 5 at 4.3 million hours watched, with Moana 2 at number 6. Paddington in Peru debuting on Netflix at number 7. Another Simple Favor at number 8. At number 9, we have Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. This was the week of the Andor series finale, so obviously there was a big bump in viewership for Rogue One. I was one of those people, and I Still Believe on Netflix rounds out the top 10 with 2.9 million hours watched. And these were the most watched streaming shows for May 12th through the 18th. And for the first time ever, and on the week that its series finale aired, Andor is the most watched streaming show on the US Nielsen charts at 15.5 million hours watched, just ahead of Bluey. And honestly, for any show to get ahead of Bluey, I think is pretty impressive. Grey's Anatomy is at number 3. Criminal Minds is at number 4. You is at number 5. The Last of Us is at number 6 with 12.4 million hours watched. The Rookie on Hulu is at number 7. The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives returns to the top 10 with 11.3 million hours watched. Then Forever on Netflix debuts at number 9 with 11.18 million hours watched. And NCIS, a stalwart on this chart, rounds out the top 10 at 10.95 million hours watched. And with Andor wrapping up its run, it may appear on the Nielsen charts one more week with some spillover viewership. I wanted to look at its viewership compared to other Star Wars shows on Disney Plus. These are the ones that I have viewing totals for, and you can see that The Mandalorian is easily the most watched Disney Plus show. This is viewership across all 3 seasons that were reported on the Nielsen sheets at 320.78 million hours watched. Andor, with 2 seasons, comes in second place at 125.42 million hours watched. Then we have the Book of Boba Fett, which I think had a lot of anticipation but disappointed a lot of people. It's still, though, with 1 season, the 3rd most watched according to the Nielsen ratings Star Wars show on Disney Plus at 83.13 million hours watched. Then we have Obi-Wan Kenobi. Its 1 season is at 70.98 million hours watched. Ahsoka's 1 season is at 67.82 million hours watched. And then we have a big drop off. The Acolyte only charted for 2 or 3 weeks on the Nielsen ratings, and it has 19.88 million hours watched. The Bad Batch, through 3 seasons, the animated show, only, I think, charted for 1 week at 4.18 million hours reported. And then Skeleton Crew never charted on the Nielsen Originals chart. So we have no viewership data from Nielsen. So it comes in at 0. So when you look at what Disney has done with Star Wars on Disney Plus, The Mandalorian is an easy success story. Andor, especially when you consider its quality and the fact that so many people like the show, I think would be considered a success story. But everything else, if you're just looking at the ratings and the viewership, a bit more of a mixed bag because it has not been the most successful, or at least as consistently successful as I think Disney would want from a brand like Star Wars. Speaking of being consistent, this is The Last of Us Season 1 versus Season 2 in its reported Nielsen streaming ratings. And you can see that the first and second season, the first season's in red, the second season is in green, started out about the same. Week 2 of the second season actually did better than the week 2 numbers for season 1, but there has been a precipitous decline since then. And if you've seen the show, you know that there was something that happened in season 2 that might have gotten people to tune out. But we see a big dip in week 3, another big dip in week 4, and then it flattens out in week 5, which is the latest week that we have data for. So I'm going to keep updating this chart. But what we seem to be seeing right now is a pretty substantial fall off in viewership for The Last of Us. And the other numbers that have come in that aren't Nielsen have already said that this was the case with this second season. Finally, these are Nielsen's top 20 shows when you order them by watch time per available episode. So you take the total number of hours viewed and divide that by the number of episodes available to watch. At number 1 is American Manhunt, Osama bin Laden, with just over 3 million hours watched per episode. It had just 3 episodes. Then Forever does pretty well at 1.4 million hours per episode for each of its 8 episodes. The 4 Seasons is at 1.14 million hours watched per episode, followed by Secrets We Keep and The Last of Us at number 5. Mobland is at number 6. Andor stays in the top 10 at 646,000 hours watched per episode, now with all 24 episodes accounted for. The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is in 8th place, followed by Poker Face and You. And that does it for the show this week. Before we go, though, I want to give you an idea of some things to look out for, both in theaters and at home this upcoming week, stuff that you might be interested in watching. First of all, we have a trio of recent theatrical releases, which are hitting premium video on demand and or purchase on Tuesday. Final Destination Bloodlines will be available to watch at home, as will Friendship and Fight or Flight. That would actually be quite a triple feature as well. And then opening this weekend in theaters, of course, we have Elio, the latest film from Pixar. I'm curious to see this one. I don't think I'm going to have an early review for it, but I should have a review for you on Friday. 28 Years Later will also be hitting theaters this weekend. I will have a review for this when the embargo lifts later this week. I'll be hitting the road to see it. Also, if you're not interested in zombie movies, or maybe if you are and you also like comedies starring Rebel Wilson, Bride Hard will be hitting theaters. Rebel Wilson plays a bridesmaid who's also a secret agent, and it looks like crazy stuff disrupts the wedding that she is supposed to be in. So if that's the kind of movie that you're looking for, it's in theaters this weekend. In many theaters, you can catch Critical Role Live, Sydney, Australia, which is a recorded live appearance from Critical Role. I believe they're celebrating their 10th anniversary. In many theaters as well, you can celebrate the 20th anniversary of Brokeback Mountain, which, if you haven't seen it on the big screen, is an absolutely gorgeous film, and also a beautiful film when you just take the visuals out of it. In limited release this upcoming weekend is Marlee Matlin, Not Alone Anymore, a documentary about the actress that got some great buzz coming out of Sundance. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you haven't seen a Minecraft movie, or if you just want to throw popcorn around your own house, A Minecraft movie will be making its debut on Max. And then finally on Sunday, as part of Studio Ghibli Fest 2025, The Secret World of Arrietty, I'm not going to get it wrong this year, the 15th anniversary celebration will be in theaters, I believe, on Sunday night and stretching into Monday and possibly Tuesday night. And that's all I've got for you this week. As I mentioned, stay tuned right here for reviews of F1 and 28 Years Later right here on the channel, as well as LEO. And make sure to hit that subscribe button if you just generally want the latest in movie news, reviews, box office, and more. But most of all, thank you for watching this episode. I'll see you again very soon, but until then, stay safe. Bye.